In the last video we set a challenge. In this video we'll go through the practice exercise answer. The challenge was to create a league with teams and points, then create matches with the match scores entered by the user, calculate the points from the matches and then update the league table. We can use the current Premier League table. We use the top 6 teams. So the idea really is to use Scratch to help you with the design and then code that in Python. And you do this by breaking it into parts. That makes the problem easier. So the problem can be broken down into 4 parts: create table, get match result, calculate match points and update table. So we'll show you each part of the design in Scratch and then go through how to achieve that with the code in Python. So here is the challenge in Python. Create the table. To set up the tables itself is not difficult. We had 2 lists. Now remember, when we create a list of strings we use double quotes. You can see here we have all the 6 teams, and for integers, the numbers, we can just put the numbers in without any quotes around them. We can check to see the teams by using a for loop. So if we just print each one, we can see the 6 teams. If we change to the score list, we can look through them and see the scores. So we can quite easily create our list of teams and list of scores. Now if we want to see them together, we should use the index. So can you remember the for loop using range? Well, this might look complicated at first. Let's break this down. So we've got a for loop and we've got I, which is a variable that's going to go from 0 to 5. That's what range 6 does. So our lists start off at 0 and go through to 5. So that's the crucial information you need to think about when we're looking at these lists. They start at 0 and end at 5. So instead of using a number 6, we can use the length of one of the lists. So that means if the list changes its length, then we change that with the range. So that's quite a common technique to look and loop through a list. So here we've got the range, the length of teams, which we know is 6. We print I, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The team in the 0 place, which you can see is Liverpool. The team in the place 1 is going to be Man City, 2 Arsenal, 3 Leicester, 4 Chelsea and 5 Crystal Palace. In the scores it's the same. So I is going to be 0, it's going to print 24, then 16 down to 14 at the end. Now once we've created our tables, we can change that to a function by giving it a function name, setup table. We're going to call it by calling setup table with the brackets, and the actual code will be inside the function itself. So we put DEF for define, the function name, the brackets, the colon and then the code which is indented. So now we have our setup table as a function, we call it and that will set up our table. Now let's get the match result. The code to get the match result is very similar to our design in Scratch. So we're just going to define a function called getScores where we're going to put our code. So we know how to define a function. Just going to use def and our function name. And now we're going to copy our Scratch blocks into Python code. So we've got our home and away team scores. So we start them off at 0. And then we're going to ask the user to enter information in, and when they enter information then we can put that into the variables. So let's use the code, if you like, from scratch that we used to. So scratch uses the word answer, so we'll use a variable called answer, make it easier. So we're just going to use input. So we have the question, enter, or the request, enter home team score, what the user will see. They'll put in a number, and then that number comes in as a string, so we need to change that to an integer. So that's the thing you need to remember with entering integers. From if a user puts in an integer, you have to remember that it actually comes in as a string, so we need to change that to an integer by putting int in brackets the variable, in this case answer. So once we've got the score, the home team score and the away team score, we can return them. Although this is not the full code yet, sometimes it's a good idea to build up half the code and then test it first to see if it works. So we return those two home team and away scores, and they go back to when we declared our function. So we're not going to show the testing in the video because it will be too long, but you might test that now. And assuming that it's correct, we can enter in the similar code to enter the home team and the away team. So it's going to be very similar to what we've got already. So you might use copy and paste quite a lot when you're coding. So here we've got virtually the same code. We're just going to take out score. So instead of home team score, we've got home team, and instead of away team score, we've got away team. So remember to take it out in all the correct places. And that's pretty much the code that we need to change. Now, once we've done that, we need to return it with the home team and the away team scores. So we can do that at the bottom of the function. One thing that we did in the demonstration as well was we entered 3 matches. So we can use a loop to go through the matches, but we need to know how many times. So in the demo we asked the user to enter how many number of matches there were, and in the demonstration we entered 3. So here we can put in matches, we're going to make it 0, then get the number of matches from the user, and then use that in a for loop. So we can just use a for loop with range and use whatever the user puts in. Obviously we change that from a string to an integer, and then we can just indent our code under the for loop. So we have our code already, we just indent that, and now we're going to run our for loop, and once we've got our match, we want to calculate the points for each of the match, so that will be inside our for loop. So that's something you need to remember. So we've got our scores, we've got our teams, and now what we can do is we can, again, you might want to test this, so we can call our calculate points within the loop because we want to calculate for each match, and then what you would do in practice is you would print all of these first and check they're working correctly before you carried on coding. So we have done that, but the video was getting too long, so we're not going to show that now, but we did test it and this did work correctly. So we'll move on to calculate points. Next we calculate the points. So after testing we can go back to our calculate points. We've called that function, so we can copy that code where we've called it and use that when we define it, so we can make sure we pass everything we need to, which is the home and away teams and scores. So again, calculate points Python code is the same as the scratch blocks we used in a demonstration. So we pretty much use the same code. with the exception that in Python, instead of using if else inside another if else, which you can do if you want, we've got if, elif and else. And in this example, this is what we can use, because we've got home team, winner, away team, winner and draw. We've got 3 options, so it fits nicely into if, elif and else. So we can start off if the home team wins. So if home team score is greater than away team score, then we give the home team 3 points. Now if the home team score is less than the away team score, the away team is the winner, then the away team will get 3 points. Now if neither of them are true, that means that both scores are the same, which means it's a draw, which means both the home team and the away team gets 1 point. So this is a very good example of when you might use an if, an elif and an else. Now because we set the home and away team points to 0 at the start, we only need to change a team's points when they win a game. So that's pretty much our calculate points. It's very similar to what we did in Scratch, except we've used the if, the elif and the else. So that hopefully should have been quite straightforward for you. Update table. So we calculated the points and we need to update the table. Now there's 2 things we need to think of here. We've got the home team points and the away team points. So the first thing we need to think about is creating a function that moves these points into the function. So we're going to pass the home team points and the away team points to the update table function. The second thing we need to think about is we actually need the table to update it. So we created the table at the beginning, as you can see in the setup table. So we need to think about how we're going to get that table through the functions, if you like, to our calculate points. So we start off, as you see, with the update table with the home team, the away team, the home team points and the away points, the same as we did in Scratch. So now we need to add the actual table. So we can move the table from calculate points to update table, but we need table to be passed to calculate points. So we go back to get scores. There we have the calc points call of the function. So get scores needs a table as well passed to it. So we go back to get scores when we called that function. So what we need to do is when we set up the table, we need to return it back and then pass it to get scores. So we look at our setup table, our original function. So we just return the table that we can update is actually the scores. So we can return score. So you can see there we've taken the table, the scores, through the code and passed, well, we originally returned it from the setup table and then we've passed it through the functions. So now we can check that with our calculate points and we can print the table to see if that works as well. So we can enter a match. So we originally see our original table, then we can see our scores, and then we can say our table that hasn't been changed yet. So up to that point everything's working okay. Now let's create the function update table, and we can use the design that we used in Scratch, the blocks we used in Scratch, showing us the design, and the code in Python is very similar. So we can create the function update table. We have all the table, the scores, the home team, away team, home team points, away team points. So we're just using the same logic, programming logic in Python as we did in Scratch. So it's just a question of, can you remember the syntax, how it's written out? So the table, with the place of the table, the index is in the square brackets. So the home team, which if it was in 0 would be the Liverpool, if it was in 1 it would be Man City, up to number 5 Crystal Palace. Remember, we start at 0. So that tells us which place in the list we're looking at, and then we just need to add the points to that place. So wherever the home team is, we can add to their points the index, and we do the same with the away team. So we can just copy and paste that and just change the home to away. So it's quite straightforward if you can work out how to use the list index, the place in the list. So the first item is in place 0, next item place 1, etc. So that's very similar to the Scratch code. So we can print a table. Good idea once you create each of these functions to test out before and after. So for example, here we're going to print the table before and after. So we can enter in a match, have a look at the table. So there's our original table. So now we're going to check not only the original table, but has it passed correctly to the update table function. So here we've got a match, and we can look, the home team 0, the away team 5. So the first team have gained 3 points, the final team, it hasn't changed. So that's worked correctly. We're coming towards the end of our coding, but there's always little things that you need to add to your code at the end. Plus, you might find you've made a few mistakes. So we've updated the table after one match, but you might have more than one match, so we need to return that table to the calculate points. So the calculate points, every time a match happens and scores are entered in our get scores, we need to update the table and return it. Otherwise we're just updating the original table. So only one match at a time, and you can't really add multiple matches, so that's no good. So basically what we're looking at is passing and returning the table through each function. Yeah. Now we can also add little parts to our code to make it better. So for example, we had our table, when we set it up, we just have changed the scores. But if we want to look at the update table, we should really have the teams as well. So you can see in our results, we correctly updated it, but we just showed you the points like 27, 16, etc. If you want to see the table correctly, you need the teams as well. So we can pass the teams with the scores when we set up the table, and then pass that to the get scores. So let's try to run our code. So here we have our table. We can try this with 2 matches. We enter in home team, away team, home team score, away team score, and it's finished. So that's not what we wanted. We wanted to enter 2 matches. So this is where we debug our code. We can look at our code and we know our error is in this for loop somewhere, because it's only entering 1 match, we want more. It turns out it's just the return table. We've put that in the loop, and actually we want to return the table after the loop. So that just that little indentation, that space between the return table, is either inside the loop or after and outside the loop made the difference. So just very, very small differences can make your code not work how you think. Python doesn't know what you want. It just does what you tell it. So you need to test. So we can test our code again with 2 matches to see if it works. So now we've entered 2 matches. We can check our tables. Yes, they've updated. The first match was updated correctly, the second match was updated correctly. Now we know our code is correct. Well, that was a very difficult challenge for a beginner, and I should imagine if you are successful that you may need to have gone through the videos and this video several times. But if you have managed to get to the end code, then you've achieved something, so well done. Please like this video, and we always welcome comments. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe.